right?
Oh! Hello there! Dr. Linksano here! Back in 2018, I conducted an experiment, and you were all my test subjects, being subjected to a midsummer's nightmare, focusing on the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla. We saw an adaptation of his return, his adventures through the Marvel Universe, a war that lasted half a century, and finally his journey through hell itself. I hosted this Godzillathon, and to celebrate Longbox's 10th anniversary, the gracious Mr. Moarte has seen fit to allow an extension on this experiment, as we now have something special. For 10 years, Godzilla's home was Dark Horse Comics, with many a mini-series and ongoing to enjoy. But it all started here, an original black and white comic published by Dark Horse. They even replaced the rook in their logo with Godzilla's head. The story is told in flashback by a woman named Noriko, recalling the day that Godzilla awoke in the ocean and how it came. She explains that many don't know why Godzilla came. Some say it was the sightings of a thunderbird in the remote parts of the country. Damn you, International Rescue! You brought Godzilla! Some say it was the swarms of locusts that descended upon the world. But Noriko knows it was because of the stone, a huge slab discovered in a construction site with strange writing on it. Hell, the thing was apparently even a little radioactive. And what's a little radiation between friends, eh? The construction crew wants it moved, but Noriko's father wants to keep studying it, figure out what the hieroglyphs on it mean. However, the more important point comes when one of the workers is attacked by some kind of large worm. They kill it, but the incident gives Noriko nightmares, although her father is living one already. After translating, he's discovered what it's about. The stone was put on the island as a way to protect the mainland from disaster monsters. Creatures like Sorin the Thunderbird, Inagos the Locust King, and the fire monster Godzilla. They need to move the stone out to sea or else the monsters will attack. Based on news reports regarding the mysterious things happening, they're already on their way. Neither the construction crew nor Noriko's bosses believe him, and he's even fired for proposing something so ridiculous. And of course they're too late. Locust swarms begin flying through the city. And at the docks, Godzilla rises from the ocean. He examines the cities that have replaced the natural countryside, and decides to voice his displeasure with thermonuclear breath. Noriko's father takes the family out to the construction site, where he meets with another of his colleagues. They now, of course, believe him, so their only chance is to try to take the helicopters they have access to and fly the stone out to sea. But Godzilla's arrival forces Noriko's father to sacrifice himself by colliding into Godzilla's head, allowing the other helicopter to fly off with the stone. However, as Godzilla chases after it, Noriko's mother is buried in rubble, leaving Noriko all alone in the destroyed city. As other monsters begin to descend on the stone, the helicopter finally manages to release it far at sea, and they all dive down after it. While the age of monsters was averted, Noriko's world was destroyed. And on the final page, she reveals that she has found one of Godzilla's scales, and after a lifetime of studying it, she knows that she is ready for Godzilla, should he ever awaken again. And of course, with this franchise, he most certainly did. Again and again, as we got to explore in A Midsummer's Nightmare a few years ago. Remember to enjoy your own Godzillathons, my test subjects. Based on one tale, Moarte didn't always used to settle down in one spot to talk about horror comics. Back when he was alive, he was a traveling man, a salesman who went door to door in almost every city in the country looking for that next big break. Vacuum cleaners, Tupperwares, encyclopedias, if there was a product to hawk, he'd have knocked on your door hoping to make a quick buck. He was usually pretty good at it, but there were plenty of dry periods. Sometimes people just had everything they ever wanted. But then he found something that turned out to be a win every time. Comic books. He couldn't explain why that was. Maybe he just tended to sell them in places where there weren't any newsstands, no local comic shop anywhere in driving distance. But when he sold comic books, he was on top of the world. But he was a bit of a cheat, since rarely did he ever sell full subscriptions.
He'd come back next month to sell each new issue individually, not even telling people that they could get them for less than his asking price. And horror comics? Ooh, people loved their escapist fiction most of all. But then, as trends tend to be, horror comics fell out of favor. He was so sure they'd make a comeback someday, and he kept hawking them, even when he had more and more people slamming doors in his face. And then one day, he knocked on the wrong door. The man he wanted to sell to was a comic fan, most certainly, but he was also a killer. And when this salesman showed up with a briefcase full of samples of the latest books, the customer killed him, left him to die in the living room, while he took the books to be preserved for his collection. As the salesman lay dying, his bleeding hand on an old horror comic, he asked for someone out there to save him, and someone answered his prayers. Unfortunately, the one who answered wasn't a good guy. This being liked the salesman's talents, and he'd let him live, or rather, unlive, as long as he kept promoting horror for the rest of his days. And thus Moarte appears every October to sell something new every day of the month.